For your enjoyment, the grand finale here, we have the most recent episode of Curious Nashville. Maybe some of you have heard it, but do not worry. This is a totally new experience. It is amped up with what you can see, the stunning shadow puppetry from our friends at Duck on a Deer Puppeteers. So this episode takes us to an epic remnant from a dramatic period in Tennessee history.
A realtor suggested this place. I didn't know the bomb shelter was actually a part of it.
Our country and all its people could be in danger of nuclear attack.
The fallout shelter is the best defense, whether in the basement of a single-family home or a large community shelter in, say, an apartment building.
So I lived here for 20 years not knowing the purpose of the building.
The Cold War and all of the fear of the Cold War, it was here in Nashville. And the state of Tennessee responded by building something out in the woods in West Nashville. Beneath one of the ridges, they created a place for the governor to go in the case of nuclear attack. And it was carefully tucked out of view, although not far from the Loveless Cafe and the Natchez Trace. But like all of our Curious Nashville stories, this one starts with a simple question from a listener.
Hello, this is Marie.
Marie Bell. She's a nurse at St. Thomas Hospital. She lives out in Fairview, Tennessee, and commutes into the city with her husband each day.
And we carpool, so I've got a lot of time in the car to just randomly search the internet.
They drive through a rural area called Pasco. The sign piqued her interest, took her over to Wikipedia.
The end of the story, the most interesting line was that it was also the site of the abandoned Cold War Communications Center, and I just thought, what in the world would they want to do in Pasco, Tennessee?
For Marie and her generation, the Cold War has deep significance. She's 63. She grew up in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, home of the Manhattan Project, birthplace of America's nuclear weapons.
Secrecy was a big thing there. We knew we were kind of a Cold War target.
She grew up with safety drills at school and siren tests. She remembers driving past ominous billboards that told employees at the Y-12 and X-10 nuclear sites, in plain terms, to keep quiet about their work.
I remember one in particular was these three monkeys sitting. One had his hands over his eyes, one over his mouth, and one over his ears, and it said, "What you see here, what you say here, what you hear here, let it stay here." I wasn't really keenly aware of any Cold War tensions, but now that I'm an adult looking back on it, it was really a dangerous time.
Briefly, a few facts about fallout. To begin with, it may be surprising to know that radiation is something we live with every day. It has always been with us.
To avoid surprise disaster, some of our aircraft must always be in the sky.
The amount of energy generated by a nuclear explosion is enormous.
Find cover away from windows and in a hallway if possible. Wait for the all clear. Be calm.
But back to Marie's question. Why was this shelter built in a rural part of Nashville?
It was basically constructed as a result of the nuclear arms race in the early 1950s.
This is the voice of Cecil Whaley, official title, Assistant Director of Preparedness for Tennessee's Emergency Management Agency. Informally, he's the keeper of the plans for whenever bad things happen. And he's intimately versed in the Cold War.
A lot of the young people today don't realize how critical that was to the United States and to the local communities. Why did people have bomb shelters at their house? Why did we have scares and those types of things? And this was all part of that history.
And for a few years, Cecil's office was inside the state's old underground facility out in the woods.
We would have deer come by. We would feed deer out of our hands. We had pretty much raccoons, every conceivable wild animal you could think of shared the space with us.
The reason for this remote location, it was at the base of the highest hill in the western part of the county. The state built a strategic communications tower on top with the bunker below, down in the earth. So if you can picture a command center or war room, this was it. There were secretive plans on the shelves. Some of Tennessee's first computers were stored there. And there was a crazy long table, 35 feet, with chairs for 40 people.
Looked like Dr. Strangelove's table, exactly. Except it had a huge round state seal in the middle of it that I've never seen the equal of. It was metal and probably weighed 200 pounds at least.
All of this underground. It was very hush-hush. A complex communications center dug into the hill, only partially visible at the surface, no windows. Cecil says it was cutting edge. Bunk space for 60 people, along with the showers, kitchen, water, food, supplies, everything that a group would need to live for 2 months. Plus, it was part of a nationwide radio warning system to alert the public. But after decades, the bunker eventually ran its course. And there was one visceral problem.
The mold situation. Oh my gosh. It was just horrible. I mean, if you didn't absolutely work on keeping the mold down on a weekly basis, come back into the building and there'd be 2 inches of green mold on the walls.
Still, it was a tough decision for Tennessee to let it go.
I was in love with it. It was a great place to work. I just really enjoyed the time that I spent there.
Except for the mold.
Except for the mold.
One of the things Cecil Whaley told me was that he always wished the bunker would become something interesting after the state sold it. So we put our news intern on the case, Jay Shaw. He learned that an eccentric businessman had gotten hold of it. He was letting people live on top of the bunker. And he was totally willing to give Jay a tour.
I pull up next to the site, 2 signs, state property, no trespassing, barbed wire. I should mention there are chickens there, the 4 chickens, and I didn't know why they were there.
And there in front of Jay was the plain facade of the bunker. It looks like a 2-story concrete retaining wall against the hill, but there's also a sloped driveway that runs up to a garage. That's where semi-trucks with supplies could drive up and in and park in these deep warehouse bays.
It felt like one of those abandoned buildings you explore when you're in college. And I was there to meet Ray McCall.
The McCall name is actually very well known in Nashville. Ray is among a group of roughly 30 family members who have owned local businesses for decades. He's involved in carpet and furniture store.
I'm about as an entrepreneur at heart as you can get. I'm open to, whatever might come down the road.
So, of course, an old bomb shelter comes into view. It was recommended by a realtor as McCall was looking for a warehouse, and he bought it more than a decade ago.
It's kind of like an ugly duck that we've learned to love, and we don't know why.
So this is the man with the keys to the bunker, our tour guide to a hidden history.
We'll go into the bomb shelter the way you would have gone into it if you were using it for a bomb shelter.
As I was getting closer and closer to it, I was like, oh, wait, we're going underground. Cool. You're telling me there's 23 inches of concrete all around me. Great. I don't have any cell reception here anymore. Great. I'm here with strangers underground in this cold bunker. You go through the doors, rusted to all hell. Creaks open, you go inside, there's a shower contamination area.
Theoretically, I think come in here to shower off. That's what it shows on the drawings.
There was occasional lighting in different areas, but most of the building was pretty dark.
Then you would come into here, and now you're really in the bomb shelter.
I don't know how I felt. I was just cold. I was very cold. I just felt like goosebumps for the most part.
Now we're going to come across where vandals came in and stole the copper out of the plumbing and a lot of the copper out of the wiring. And
thieves had broken in through a hole in the rooftop, snuck in from the top floor to the bottom floor into the bunker, and then went into the walls to rip the copper out, and then transported that back through the roof hole.
I've probably spent $10,000 on just cleaning it up to the state of dirty that it's in now.
Tennessee built this bunker in 1952, used it until 2004. A different man was the first to buy it before Ray snatched it up. He's had some grand ideas for the place, like a beer brewery. Some have suggested a museum, or maybe an underground swimming pool, since it stays naturally cool down there. But not much has really panned out.
Right now, he's using it as a storage facility for himself and his family. His wife keeps furniture in there. And somehow Ray acquired a lot of Christmas decorations from the Bellevue Mall before it got demolished. So he has a lot of very creepy wood, I don't know what they're called, the Nutcracker people. There's like old statues of them all around, and there's Mardi Gras decorations all around. And this,
so there's an additional surreal presence.
Yeah, and he told me there were vandals who broke in before he bought the place and spray tagged the whole thing, get out now. But every time Ray would open the door, I would just tense up a little bit. I was like, oh, what are we going to find now? Because, once you see a Nutcracker man in a closet, you don't see it until you flash your lights on it, and then there's a little Nutcracker in there. Oh, gosh.
Which I didn't have to see that right
I didn't want to see this right now, and I felt weird about turning my back to it.
Now here's the cool part to me. This is the generator that ran the whole kit and caboodle. And I got it working. And what is sort of fun, if you're a weirdo like me, to sit out on the front and rev it up, and it sounds like a tractor trailer coming down the valley. And maybe sit there and listen to the tractor trailer rumble and drink a little Merlot.
Eventually, Jay does emerge with Ray McCall to the upper above-ground level, inside the dark garage. Ray cranks open the overhead door to let in some light, and he leads Jay to what had been an old radio communications room, now renovated into an apartment.
Mikey, can we slip in here?
That has, TV. It's very nice. There's a bathroom, there's a kitchen. It's very comfortable. It looked very cozy. Oh, there's also 2 cats and a dog named Ewok.
But this was a radio repair station, and we put the kitchen in.
But the person who lived there told me he's been there for a couple of years now, and he's just fine with it. This is his normal.
It's out in the middle of nowhere, and I've never lived in something like this. Every time I go downstairs, it's like a new adventure.
It was a beautiful apartment, wonderful apartment, like better than where I live. But it was just such a different style of living in a former bomb shelter turned into a warehouse, turned into a quasi-apartment to live in.
In the time since we first visited, Ray McCall has had the bunker on the market, but he still has not found a buyer.
God will bring me a buyer when he wants me to have one. I look at it like a bottle of wine. The older it gets, the more valuable it gets.
And Marie Bell. She says she added a detour on the commute with her husband. She got to ride past the old bunker, confirming for herself that it is really there.
I never thought that really anybody would know anything about it. I figured it was just one of those secret things that sort of be hidden.
The state government, meanwhile. Cecil says they have a new facility for the governor in case of emergency, but he would not say where. So we're left to think about this old one. It's in limbo now and basically obsolete, but no doubt about it, it was a marvel in its time.
For with knowledge of radiation, we can face the facts about fallout and take action to protect ourselves against this hazard of the nuclear age.